As far as I know,
automatically track when someone starts speaking.
this one won't. This is like the base cheapest.
Well, it's not the Logitech one from IT Services.
No, this is like a cheaper version from the Arts Factory.
That's always the cheapest.
Fix it first.
Right. Good. That's recording. Let's just check I've got the mic. Can you just say a few words?
A few words, and then followed by a few more words. And words.
Yeah, that's looking good. Well, the last few people, there is somewhere I desperately need to go, just around the corner. Back in a second.
Was this a digital project that turned into a theatre project?
Well, I suppose more broadly, it was a theatre company that turned into a digital company doing multiple projects. So this project, which I will put that in, it kind of harks back to the theatre roots of MBD. But yeah, we are for a minute. So how many here were here before lunch and actually saw the show? Everyone here in some way involved with VR or in some way interested in VR or simply from different departments? Okay. Didn't go before lunch, or you booked on to do it different time?
I plan to, but I'm not booked in yet.
Okay.
Rob said it was recorded, did it?
For this session,
I think it's recorded on this.
there were definitely recordings taking place. I don't know whether it's ending up.
Yep, I'm recording this now.
So this was for the session this morning.
Session this morning was recorded. It's on Teams in the team space we created for all of this. That's looking good. Power. There's only one power socket I can use, and my MacBooks.
We've got extensions around.
You've got an extension.
Could be one over here.
I'll get my almost ready to go.
That's power in the floor.
How many do you need?
Just the one at the moment, thanks.
Can I unplug either of these? Probably not.
Don't plug anything. It needs to come from, that's it. See if that will. So, always carry a very long cable. Okay. There's my assistant when I need him. I'll tell you where he is, to the conference somewhere. PhD students, and he has to do these things. Couldn't say no. Oh, welcome back.
Thank you very much.
Welcome back. I think everybody know there's some new people here.
New faces
Might not,
we've established.
we do a little introduction first then. So Paul Long, genius.
A little introduction.
Genius.
No
And
pressure attached.
also able to play. That was you, wasn't it? In Theatre Electric, doing the American
Yeah,
evangelist kind
Yeah,
of
it was,
billionaire,
yeah.
world destroying person. So
Really well.
yeah. And also the introduction with all the little jokes and puns that is there to put people at their ease.
Yes.
Yes, it
Yeah.
works really well.
Yeah.
So, creative director and CEO of this is all kind of language that Warwick we're going to have to get used to because we want to work more with creative industries. Apparently, that's the arts faculty strategy. Definitely, it's a big part of what we want to do. But also, we all want to work with people like Paul, MBD, and our other industry and international partners who are more used to that kind of language, and do amazing stuff, and have more events like this where we can learn about the amazing stuff they do, the possibilities that enables. And we'll have some discussion later on. So we've got Paul talking about MBD, Theatre Electric, and other stuff. Not entirely sure what you're talking about, but it's all going to be good because it's all really cool this morning. Then we've got a session where hopefully Alex Ackridge from WMG is coming along to talk about what WMG are doing. Medical school, so medical school people. Julie's on her way. Okay, they're going to talk about stuff they're doing. I'm going to talk quite briefly about the arts faculty strategy, which this fits into beautifully. Okay, so you don't want to listen to me.
I was also the voice of the reader of the audio book in the library.
Yeah.
And the Shill CEO in there as well.
But not
Yeah.
the female voice.
Not the female voice, no.
Somebody else to do
I
with the
ran out of skills at that.
annoying voice. Okay, great. Thanks. Over to you.
Thank you.
Oh, I can't sit there because I'll be in the way of the camera.
So I suppose, first of all, thank you for inviting me. Really chuffed to be here and kind of be part of this conversation and the plans for Warwick going forward. The brief for today was fairly open, I'm going to say. So I think what Robert asked me here to talk about is MBD's work in virtual reality and other immersive technology, but also kind of how we arrived at this point and to focus a little bit on what we're doing now and what we'd like to do next and where we'd like to see the sector go and grow in terms of the creative and the arts and culture sector, but also to kind of introduce this as a skill set that can be used by other people as well for for their own work. I hope it's all going to be of interest, but most of all, I suppose I hope it helps us find a shared direction and ways that we can share skills, knowledge, experience and resources to further the sector. I have got slides, but basically my slide technique is everything on here is visual because I can't say it, and everything that comes out here is things that I didn't want to write up on slides because I'm already saying it. So I hope that's okay for everyone in the room. I will just begin this, and I suppose this is just to say these are all projects that we've made in the last 4 or 5 years. And I will kind of reference some of them as well. But most of all, they are there just so that if you're really bored of listening to me, these should be nice and pretty. So I was going to start off with telling you a little bit about me and the origins of MBD. And it's interesting because yesterday I watched the interview that Robert did with Catherine Allen, which I recommend you watch as well. It's on the Teams environment, I think, for this group, and people can get hold of it. She talked about her background studying here at Warwick as a theatre studies student. And I suppose it's worth me saying, believe it or not, I'm also a theatre studies graduate. I graduated in 1997, but from Lancaster University, which actually, certainly at that time, was a very similar course. It was about contemporary theatre, different methods of presentation within theatre, but also kind of installation work and that sort of thing as well. So my background is very much in creative disciplines and particularly in theatre. So MBD began life as a theatre company. That was in 1997, and it was by 4 graduates of the theatre studies course at Lancaster, of which, like I said, I was one. So my journey, I guess, in all of this began in the mid-1990s. So for obvious reasons, VR wasn't a big part of what I was thinking about at the time. It was, you know, almost 20 years from when I graduated, really, until I got hold of a Google Cardboard or anything that would start to get me involved in this area. It's a long way from what I studied. But in those intervening 20 years, MBD as a company branched out from small-scale touring theatre into museums, gallery, exhibitions, outdoor art, sometimes very large-scale outdoor art as well. We made big outdoor shows for audiences of like 5,000 to 10,000 people at a time. And we also made things like tours of historic houses and unusual spaces as well. And I think through all of that time, we used technology in the work. So we incorporated video into what we did. We incorporated and made our own soundtracks for the work we did using digital tools. A lot of the stuff that we did in terms of tours of historic houses and exhibitions in particular was about automating experiences, so that effectively what we were trying to do, you know, consciously or otherwise, was to make shows that had a running order, that had a narrative progression, but that we didn't need to be in. So it was, you know, 3-dimensional spaces, installations, exhibitions, where all of the content and the video and the sound all moved around in the space, and people could kind of track that and move within it. And, you know, I'll come back to it, but basically that as a grounding for working in virtual reality was pretty good, I'd say. It set us up well. So as a theatre director, I already understood how lighting could be used, how sound added atmosphere to the work, how we could use video to sort of augment the storytelling, but also direct people around the space as well. And we were mapping projection to 3D spaces using kind of rudimentary tools and Photoshop masks long before projection mapping software was a thing and the kind of stuff that we use now, or at least long before we ever had access to them. So I used all of those skills and techniques. Technology was always a part of what we did. And the evolution to VR kind of came through that route. So I think linked to that, we had a little bit of a conversation earlier about process. I think Erwin mentioned process. Process doesn't change and VR is just a tool. And that's one of the things that I kind of wanted to talk about. I am a director, I'm a producer. My core skills in terms of what I bring to the VR experiences are the same as they always were. I don't work in games engines. Ironically, I am the CEO of the company, but I don't actually know how to use Unreal Engine, and I'm okay with that. It was one too many things for me to learn after a lifetime of learning other things. But what we have done is built a team of people who can do that. So, and again, this is similar to what Catherine Allen talked about as well. Like when I first discovered VR, a lot of things just clicked into place. I already understood the 3D space, like I said, how to direct audiences' attention, how to tell stories. And also because of the immersion that we built into our shows, how to tell stories through interactive mediums as well, not just as passive experiences. And as I mentioned earlier, I don't know if you've seen any yet, but we were making really large scale outdoor shows as well. So this kind of coincided with a period of my life when, you know, practical stuff was catching up with me as well. Like we had shows on 2 or 3 articulated trucks at a time, and building them just really hurt my body like it hadn't done 10 years, 20 years earlier. I had a family who didn't want me to be away touring all the time. So all of this was kind of going on in the background. And then I came across VR. And I think the thing for me is I love making work at scale. I love big, ambitious ideas. I like working on them. But in physical spaces, like I say, there are things that come with that, the travel, the time away, etc., that I wasn't such a big fan of anymore. And in VR, what I realized was you can build at scale. You can build as big as you want. If you want a mountain range, you build a mountain range. If you want a city, city. You know, all of these things are actually really possible in virtual reality. But in terms of distribution and sharing the work, no articulated trucks required, which for me was a massive bonus. So, like, you know, when we talk about the transition into virtuality and the journey, some of it is about like the creative possibility and the technical possibility. That's a big part of what kind of quenched me as a creative person. But some of it is also like there are, and for me, it was advantages for myself in my life, but there are advantages with that which are about distribution. It's how we can reach people, how we can take experiences to others as well, that I think are really important. So, it was around like 2016 that we began to transition into using immersive technology as the bedrock of our work and building the team we needed to deliver that work. So that brings us to today, basically. MBD is an Arts Council national portfolio company, which means we're annually funded by Arts Council to do the work that we do. We are pretty much unique, if not unique, in the portfolio in terms of the fact that all of the work that we do is immersive technology based. There are other organisations in the portfolio who do work with immersive technology. I'm not claiming that, you know, from anybody else, but for us, it's all we do and it's only what we do. And that kind of puts us in quite a good position in some ways in terms of the portfolio, but in other ways very tricky because a lot of people don't understand what we do. So that's why I'm here kind of sharing it as well. So for the most part, that work is virtual reality, which I mention a lot, and because it's also the show that we're sharing here, but it does also span large-scale outdoor projection and indoor projection as well, and exhibition still, and some mixed and augmented reality projects as well. I personally am a research fellow for both the University of Leicester and Aston University, open for other universities. And so a lot of the work that we've done through the years, we've collaborated with those and other universities, either to undertake research as part of a project or also to reinterpret work, research that has already been done for kind of public dissemination. Impact work, I think, is the correct term in academic circles. So it is about that kind of public dissemination of the work that has already been done. So that can be reinterpreting. For example, we have a project at KwaZulu-Natal Museum in South Africa, which is about South Africa's involvement in World War I, and also internment within South Africa during that period, which all came from a professor of global history at Aston University. So that is, like I say, classic kind of impact, as well as doing a publication. We are also creating work for the public. And then one of those projects also worth mentioning pre-pandemic, quite early, was with Warwick University with the synthetic biology department, which was to explain synthetic biology, I suppose, to young people at science fairs across the UK. So
we still have that on headset experience.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, still works. So in the team mentioned earlier, there's me who comes from a theatre background, but we also have a participation, training and skills development specialist. So somebody who actually goes out doing kind of skills development with other people, either young people or professional training as well. We've got more traditional animation and media production skills. And I guess probably the key difference coming back to our role in the portfolio for us is that we have our own team of games designers working in Unreal Engine. So not freelancers or project specific collaborations, which is really the norm within the art sector. And, but we've built our kind of diverse team all under one roof. And what that means is that we learn from each other as we go and we grow as a unit, and we take all of the skills from every project with us to the next. And I think that's also why we can take a long-term view of the type of work we want to make, like Theatre Electric that we did before, and we can build the capacity to make and deliver those ambitious projects. Again, it was something that was mentioned in the sessions before lunch for those of you who were there about project funding within the arts and culture sector and within academia as well, this idea that you kind of do a project, and once the project funding has run out, it goes on the shelf and it doesn't go further. And I think that is one of the things that is holding back the progression of work in places like immersive technology, because we're not taking stuff with us and we're not growing as we go. So in terms of that kind of history, how the company works and how we came to this, one of the most important things that I think for any, I've written creative discipline, but actually any discipline, is shared language. And so working with technology is no exception. And yes, coming back, I mentioned this earlier, coming back to what Erwin Shepherd said earlier in the previous session, he talked about process not being unique to VR. VR is just a tool. And I've likened it to traditional art skills, and particularly building scenes in the 3D process. I liken to set design because it's part of my kind of background. So if you think about it, the terminology itself is often taken directly from other traditional arts disciplines. It is sculpting, it is painting, texturing, you know, all of these things that are, and lighting, they're all kind of from other disciplines as well. But in stage design terms, for example, a lot of the fundamental principles are the same. When you build a stage set, the first thing you do is you sit down with your group of people involved and you talk about ideas. There's nothing VR or technology specific about sitting down and talking about ideas. You can jot them down on an iPad, that's okay, it makes it more technological, but really it is just a discussion. And the same applies in whatever discipline. The next thing that you would do, again in stage design or creating a storyboard for film, is turning that into images, which is really sketches to start with, and then later kind of, I guess, more developed illustrations or images or static artworks that actually get across the idea of what you want. And also with that, collecting mood boards, so taking inspiration from other places and images from other projects that actually help you get your head around it. Exactly the same in VR. And then once you've done that, in stage design, you create a white card model, which is, it is what it sounds like. It's a model made of white card. So it's not a visual representation, but it starts to consider scale and build and where things are placed. Exactly the same in VR. You make a white, a block out of your project. So you just actually start positioning things in the world of where you want them to go. And then once you've done that and you're happy with your, the final stuff that you want to build, you then commission the work, get it built or build it yourself, and you paint it, you texture it, and you make it look beautiful, and then you put it to show and you light it. Every single part of the process is exactly the same in VR. So essentially, I suppose the message that I wanted to kind of share is the technology itself, it can be quite daunting for people. I think for everyone here, you're kind of involved in a certain way. Maybe it doesn't apply in quite the same way as other people, I talk to within the art sector, etc., who could be quite afraid of it. But actually, if you just think about it in terms of your current skill set, there is nothing stopping you kind of imagining and realizing what you can do in VR. So yeah, we're trying really to build a sustainable infrastructure for that technology. And to do that, I think the important thing is not to work in silos. It is about bringing those teams of people together. So I know that there are people from various different departments in the room today, and I like to think that we can all be helpful to each other. And over about the last 6 or 7 years for MBD, we've embraced exactly that. We've learned, we've iterated, and with every project we've added a new layer of complexity, so that we've unlocked with that new levels of creativity. So we now have motion capture, for example, that we can use. We have our own motion capture volume in Leicester, which is an optical camera-based system. We also, with that same system, do virtual production, which is camera tracking, and then we can cross over live performance with virtual backgrounds for film and TV and screen-based media like that as well. But all of that has kind of come over time. We've built that up. One of the things we were very conscious of doing was not trying to tackle everything all at once. It's that classic, just because you can doesn't mean you should, right? You've got to kind of master one thing and then move on, rather than trying to do everything at the same time. And I suppose through that process, the thing that we're sharing here earlier today and for the rest of this week is kind of our niche, and it is quite a technically kind of forward part of virtual reality, which is co-location, and that is where multiple people can share the same experience together at the same time. So I suppose it comes full circle for me. We are making experiences that are social, they're shared, they're just like a show or an exhibition that basically is what we were making 20 plus years ago when we started out. So all of that is a kind of long and roundabout way of saying, I guess, things have changed a lot. Not that much. I suppose in terms of achievements, our Immersive Works won awards at festivals on 4 continents. We've got work as part of a national showcase with 400 headsets at partner libraries and cinemas. As I mentioned, we've also got a project currently hosted in South Africa and soon to be hosted in Barbados as well. And we've got a 3-month immersive exhibition that's just finished in our hometown of Leicester. And along the way, we've made a 17th century ship, a trench, a lift that travels through time, an 18th century rotunda, a 19th century train, a 20th century moonlander, a station filled with the graffiti. We've linked dancers in motion capture in 2 different countries. We've made a museum that charts the demise of humankind, Theatre Electric. And we have, in the last 5 years, built all of those and much more as well in the work that we've done. So, yeah, we're busy, fair to say. The other thing to say for us, maybe just as a kind of broader observation, that the arts sector, particularly arts and culture, is struggling at the moment. There are areas which are finding things more difficult, again, from post-pandemic, rebuilding audiences and visitor numbers is difficult. I want the arts sector to thrive as much as anybody else, but I suppose from our point of view as well, we've not found that. This kind of last period since the pandemic is, I think, the most difficult time in the 25 or so years that I've been working in the arts. But we became an MPO in 2018 and we started then as 4 people working. We are now a team of 10, which, okay, we're not like a huge organisation, but we have thrived during that period. And within that, we've also developed a really rapidly growing outreach offer, which shows the demand from other people as well. So outreach and training are a big thing for us in terms of other people wanting to know about those skills and find ways to use them. So for us, I think I'm excited by the technology and I'm excited by the creative possibilities, but there is also, you know, a really valuable discussion to be had about sustainable business models as well for the arts culture sector, but for other sectors as well, and how technology and immersive technology can play a part in that. And again, it came up earlier with things like virtual simulations that Erwin was talking about as a much easier way to be able to disseminate work than, you know, flying people out to do training, etc., etc. So it applies in different sectors as well as the arts. But I think it's important that we, you know, as much as we're trying to preserve a lot of what has gone before within the arts, we also need to be future facing as well. So that kind of leads us into a little bit more of Theatre Electric. So a lot of you did this before lunch, but for those who didn't, I'll just play this very quick video to co-location. Been on there, not on there. That's good. You see it. Saying how much I like technology. It's not going to work for me. We'll come back to it. I'll try to play at the end. Theatre Electric is, I think for me, it's important to kind of differentiate between Theatre Electric, which is the project or the show that you watched, versus the way that we see it in terms of an organisation. It is an amalgamation of a lot of our experience in virtual reality. So it includes, you know, graphically the stuff that we've worked on, storytelling the stuff that we've worked on, and from the history of the company. It also includes interactivity, which we've put into other projects, but it takes it a step further into co-location. It's technically more difficult because you have to replicate a lot of what people are seeing to each other. It runs through a server. There are things you need to share, but creatively it opens up a lot of potential as well. So it is, I guess, us stretching ourselves. But I think the key thing is when I talk about Theatre Electric, what I imagine is a platform or a venue. Like Theatre Electric is the ability to make more of these shows in the same footprint. But again, if you compare it to something like a theatre, we can show Theatre Electric in a room this size over and over and over again. Whereas in theatre terms, you're talking about large buildings, large infrastructure, big costs, only really in use for a couple of hours a day. The infrastructure, not only in the building, but people coming in, bringing set, etc., etc. So there are kind of carbon questions around that as well. Theatre Electric is, I suppose, our attempt just to think about something that is sustainable as a business, but maybe sustainable from a kind of environmental point of view as well. And the idea is that we want to use that same technology and that same footprint to build more shows so that there is a library of content which can sit wherever it is. So if it's at Warwick University in this room, that people can come and they can choose from 10 or 20 different shows that they want to see that has an interest to them. But what we're not doing, which I think is what's happening a lot at the moment, is reinventing the platform on which it runs every time. Because I think there is at the moment, and again, I can talk much more knowledgeably about the creative sector than other areas, but there is a lot of prototyping. There's a lot of people doing a lot of different things, but that's a nightmare for actually staging anything. You know, theatres exist with basically a stage and a lighting rig and, you know, the basic tools that anyone needs to bring in a show. With VR, it could be different headsets, different floor space, different controllers that people need to use, like different servers that run so that people don't know how to host or share the work, and it just makes it really difficult. And, you know, I'm not saying that we are going to solve that problem with this, but at least we are thinking about it, and we are trying to kind of open up a space where other people can collaborate with us to share work, where we can all have a space to actually reach audiences. So that is what you want to do with Theatre Electric. And again, this is something that Catherine Allen talked about in the discussion yesterday, about having a constant presence for audiences. Like at the moment, a lot of VR work is going to festivals and kind of small events, and it gets shown to a few people at a time, and then it kind of disappears. And that's not really a long-term way forward. So I want VR and immersive technology to build broader appeal, wider adoption, and a collaborative ecosystem. I think from a sector point of view, we need new spaces that are set up to share the work. And from a selfish point of view, I want more people to see what we do. So ultimately, those things are interlinked. And as they say, a rising tide floats all ships. That's kind of the way that I like to think of it. So in terms of the benefits, we can deploy our skills in a lot of different ways, but at the heart, we're a creative company, I suppose. But there are loads of reasons why digital work is key to the future of the creative sector in particular, but again, a lot of these will apply to others. For me, one is audience equity. We talked earlier, again, about reaching people in different spaces. It doesn't matter if we show Theatre Electric in Soho, Skegness or Scunthorpe, the quality is exactly the same for every single audience member. It doesn't require, you know, a certain different space in any of those to make it better or worse. It's a, relatively speaking, an affordable infrastructure. So this experience only uses a small footprint, this room. It's all in headset, so nobody sees the space. So premises, fit out, staffing costs, all of those are kept low. And that means that in theory, we can have them everywhere, which brings us to replicability. Venues everywhere, it's not only affordable, it actually supports the business model itself. So one of the great things about making work digitally is it can be replicated. If there are half a dozen headsets, the show's ready to go, but equally it can run in 5 or 10 or 100 places all at the same time without any degradation of quality of experience for anyone. And like I mentioned before, carbon footprint comes into that as well. So compared to the kind of shows that we made when we started out, like the mid-90s, the carbon footprint is also tiny. It's not non-existent, and I think like that is a really nuanced discussion that needs to be had about technology as well. But you know, all the things that we've talked about in terms of actually the infrastructure, the venues, all of those actually make something that is technically simpler but there's no set that's built or disposed of. There's no transport for cast or crew. No need to run stages for days at a time when they're empty. And also, as I mentioned earlier, if you build on that theory, you also build in choice. So whereas, again, something like a theatre can only show one show at a time, a theatre electric space can show 10. You could, like an escape room, so you can come in and choose what you want to do when you want to do it. And it gives a lot more choice in that respect. So I suppose, just to sum up, for me, I suppose the key thing is immersive tech, it's not supposed to be scary. We just consider it to be fun and find the right people to work with that make it fun and take away the bits you don't know. But also, it does take time and patience to be good at something. You know, it's not a silver bullet. It's the same as everything else that you have to learn. Technology is no different. So my advice, what it was, is approach it with curiosity, not fear, and you will have a blast. I don't know. I mean, yeah, I'm open for questions or anything. I want to make sure I left time for that if anybody wants to ask either about the work that we do or the technology that we use, or, you know, talk about the kind of things that you're thinking about using it for. Then we have a little bit of time, am I right?
Yeah, we've got plenty of time,
Yeah.
so okay, and we could do a bit where we might put ideas, things we could do. But we get do some sort of questions responding to your let's talk first. 4 points. I got a point to make, which is something that's recurring.
Yeah.
Which is think about the kinds of skills, capabilities, attitudes that our students will benefit from getting at university when they leave. One of the key things is this ability to work in teams, understand the big picture, and understand the different roles that are necessary for that, but also to discover roles as you're going along. About, okay, so we need that kind of person, then bring them in. And that kind of flexible team working kind of way. Now, it's interesting that I know you and Catherine as well, theatre studies graduates. They had kind of got that from theatre studies. I could see that, you know, I know from theatre studies graduates who've got that as well. So it's that kind of ensemble working and the problem solving and the collaboration that I'm pointing towards Tim here, who's from theatre studies, that your students do. But I see that in theatre studies. It's there in lots of other disciplines as well. But it's something we need to focus on. I think when Erwin was talking about how the students they get in their group at Monash work as well, they are very much getting into that environment where they have to do that. Yeah. And they're doing projects, they're taking responsibility and having to find the resources. Yeah.
I think a lot, for me, like a lot of it does stem from the skill set, but also I think studying something like theatre, and particularly if you go on to practice, which is what I always wanted, even when I was at university, we were already touring. What you develop quite early is a real awareness about how people use and react to the work that you're doing, or view and react to, or use and react to in the case of immersive technology. And I think it's not just an understanding of what you're making, it's just an understanding of who's going to end up watching it and, you know, who those people are. We were discussing briefly before lunch as well about, you know, how far do we push the interactivity? How much do we expect of our audiences and all of those? And kind of fine, you know, there's a fine balance and you don't always get it right, but we're always asking ourselves those questions as we go, which some people sometimes don't, I think.
Attention to design detail.
Yeah.
That's really important. Yeah. That's another factor. So I'm not saying that only theatre studies.
No.
Because what I'm saying is that this kind of collaborative working is something we need to promote and discover elsewhere as well, and working across disciplines too.
Yes.
So the arts faculty is very keen to work with science and technology.
I mean, I think that kind of came through a little bit, albeit it was a long while ago, quite a small project, but with the synthetic biology project that we did, because it came from the Institute of Synthetic Biology. And actually, I mean, we're being flippant or anything. Oh, maybe you didn't then. Robert might correct me on that. The relationship, as far as I knew, came from there. But what happened was they kind of came originally with an idea, and it was like, we're looking for a technical partner to build this thing. And then there was a description of what the thing was. And so I read this storyboard. And I was like, doesn't make any sense. Like, it might make sense to you because you understand all of the terminology, but this is for science fairs, for young people to explain it. So chances are, if I don't understand it and I'm being asked to build it, that is a problem that gets passed on. So like our role in that was also kind of mediating, trying to kind of tease out that story, how we could animate it, turn it into something more kind of relatable and everything as well. So it absolutely needs all of the knowledge and the research behind it, but that broader team also brings with it a different awareness of like maybe where it will end up.
I can't remember the name of the scientist who did that. Do you remember? She was great, and so I was I wasn't deeply involved in it. I was kind of helping a bit of advice as we were going on following the project, and I could see how much she learned so quickly.
Yeah.
In addition to her science stuff, out of that. And I was there when she presented that back to a room full of serious science researchers. There were no students there, it was serious science people. And it just clicked. It worked. They all got it. And you could see that group of scientists were being transformed. They were having something additional added there.
Yeah.
Got that kind of,
I mean, it's not always quite so. Like the one that I mentioned that we made for South Africa, that was research done by a professor of global history. So then, since then, I've also stood in history conferences and kind of presented that work as well. And a lot of people are very welcoming of it, but other people are very skeptical. There is that whole argument about whether it's being dumbed down or whether you're taking things out, whether it's, but, even within that process, like it started off, we said we're going to make something about South Africa. And they said, okay, well, here's like, 40,000 words about South Africa. We're making a 5-minute experience. And it was like, well, you have to kind of be able to make those decisions and that, but it has to be very sensitive as well. I can joke about it now, but there is a real journey that needs to be taken to trust each other.
That's a similar challenge we have when people from academic backgrounds, especially students, start podcasting and they want to just read their essay.
Yeah.
Which does not make for good hearing.
Yeah.
It's
It's a very different kind of thing. And I think it flips the other way as well. One of the things that I was really interested with the interview you did with Catherine when she talked about audiences, because she talked about setting up the venue in Bristol, and she was saying the problem is at the moment VR is is owned by the gamers, and she talked about like lightsaber lighting and kind of LEDs and computers and all this very technical feel, and instead she wanted something softer and she wanted to think of it as an arts discipline and where that project was. And I do agree, however, I think that works both ways. I've worked in the arts for knocking on 30 years, and it's always saying we want to reach new audiences, and then the second you go, here's a whole, working in VR, here's a whole set of audience members on a plate who are not currently engaging. I mean, I don't want to say they're not culturally engaged, because I think they are. I think games are a massive part of culture, and a lot of those games now they're complex things as well, and sometimes based on research like Hellblade, and like there is so much in those. But actually, I think it needs to work both ways. We need to be making stuff as artists and keeping those people in mind as part of our audience, not just trying to change everyone to be what we think the art should be.
It's our Monday plug for the VR club here. 4:30 Monday evenings during term in the Fab. We have an open session. Anybody can come along, use the headsets and do anything. We have people coming along to do gaming stuff, sporty stuff, and cultural and art stuff, and they talk to each other. We have some really interesting engagements there. That's really important. So getting all of that broad picture.
Yeah.
I'll shut up now and give space for it.
Sorry, yeah.
Any questions or points?
I think it's really good because it's that basis, isn't it? Storytelling is at the heart of experience with each other, learning, development, right back to the early man and right educating.
Yeah.
I think it's got a lot of potential to basically be a teaching tool and a learning tool, for development tool through interactive storytelling.
I have a question about so I use it for teaching. One of our limitations at the moment is the number of students we can get into the headsets, because we have to set up each one individually, and that is quite a bit of time, so it's impractical to do it with a whole big group of students. What deployment system or software do you use to get across to multiple, or do you also have to set them up individually?
No, we don't set them up individually. So for public facing, I'm curious, what headsets do you use? Mind me asking.
Quest 2s at the moment.
Yeah. So we don't use Quest 2s because you have to set them all up individually. I mean, yeah, again, we touched on this before lunch, but everything's linked to Facebook as well. Ethics questions around that, absolute nightmare for anything publicly shared. But the way that they're set up is every time you take the headset off, it will throw you back out to the menu, back into the store, try and make you buy something, you know, blah, blah. So you're forever kind of standing next to people going, what can you see? Point at the thing. Like, so we don't use them for that reason. So isn't just software, it's hardware. We use, generally for our publicly shared stuff, Pico G3, which is just a 3-dot flight film headset. It's not really good for interactive stuff. You can't bill for it. But it's dead simple to use, and it's the cheapest version that you can get, but it's an enterprise headset. So you can disable all of the functions that you don't want. We can put kiosk mode, so it sends people straight into, in this case, the video player that we use, so that we can load up whatever we want people to see, and they don't. You know, even if we sent it to you, we have a thing called delivered, which is basically postal headset, so we can preload it with the content. And so when you receive it, you would just press the power button and it would switch on, and that would be it. So that's how we get around that. And then for more complex stuff, we either use Pico 4, which is a 6-dot headset, but again, got to be careful because there's a consumer version of that, which has the same problems as the Quest, and there is an enterprise version of that, which means that you have, again, all of that control in terms of how you want to share stuff and how they load up. And you know, we were saying again, for a co-location piece that we're making now, we're using Pico 4s, and it is now at the point where, again, you press the power on, it will automatically join the server by itself. It will automatically load up the program, and then you put it, it's ready to use. And the same applies to an extent to these, the Vive Focus 3. They're more enterprise focused than consumer focused, so you have more control over them, although they are, I think, slightly behind the Pico 4s. So yeah, we get around it partly by not using Quest, it's for sure.
They are a pain.
They're a total pain, but also they're a great, you know, like for all their problems, they're cheap because of all those issues. They're cheap because they use the console kind of pricing model where they sell you their headset cheap, but then they're forever trying to make you buy stuff and force you back to it. But you know, for a first dip into VR, I would still recommend Quest to anyone.
Do you happen to know if it's also the case of the Quest Pros, because they are like 5 times the price?
I don't know.
So in fact, all Quest, I don't know about Quest 2 if they'll work with it, but there is an expensive enterprise management platform subscription, $15 per headsets per month, I think it is, and it's not great. And they're just about to release an education platform, which I'm guessing is going to be pretty expensive as well. It's quite hard for us at the university to do things like subscriptions to services like that. It's hard to get the purchasing people to agree to anything. In fact,
there was a kind of like one of those sort of unicorn things that was like the Quest business edition as well, which you could pay like £1,000, but I've never actually seen one in the wild.
But that's been replaced now with this new service.
Yeah, I know that
business, which is like enterprise.
Yeah,
In theory, can control devices that they designed around individuals.
Yeah,
using those devices.
Yeah,
and then potentially thinking meta education, which is that model, but in an education setting.
Right.
So kind of what that looks like.
Yeah, I think
there was one that was available and got retired. But
Yeah.
we're using Arbor XR at the moment to scale.
Yeah, I was going to say Arbor XR is
Scale.
oh,
That's our next big vision. Don't bore people with it twice.
yeah.
it's the same assumption that Apple made for a long time, which was that an organisation would be providing one device with the iPad, one device per person. I don't understand. You just can't afford that kind of.
Yeah, but it is a big problem really for public, like work that you want to share publicly. Again, like coming from the background that we come from, it's always been make it as easy as possible for people to use or see, and also for, you know, if you're talking about staffing in museums or whatever, you don't want to be giving people a whole booklet of instructions to be able to switch something on, switch it off. That's why. And then half the time it doesn't work very well if you're trying to hack things in those spaces as well. So, you know, that's why the ubiquitous this this exhibit is not working kind of stuff is a bit of an Achilles heel for the technology sector. But I mean, it's funny because I remember when we made Empire Soldiers, which was our first kind of full games engine VR piece, it was PC VR, but we had again 6 headsets, 6 PCs all attached, but we built it so that in Windows, when you press the power button on the computer, it booted up and did everything all by itself. So we toured it, we always sent it out with one person accompanying 6 headsets, and they would manage all of that. And we went to a festival, I think it was in Bristol, but we went to a festival and the BBC were there sharing a project they'd done, which was like based on their Lancaster bomber project. There were 2 that were very similar, made by different people. But they also had 6 headsets, 6 computers, and 6 people. Like that. Only the BBC could manage that, but we definitely could. But, you know, like, it needs thinking about. You can't sustain that sort of stuff.
So in terms of scalability, is 6 the technical limit at the moment?
No, 6 was, I mean, purely arbitrary. For us, it was, we got funding for 6 headsets and we had space for 6 people in our studio. But in theory, you can put sort of, it's the, we have kind of stress tested it to its limit, but not its bandwidth, because obviously we are sharing information backwards and forwards through the server about position. But that also depends how much data you choose to share. If you're replicating lots of objects in the world that you've interacted with, it gets heavier and heavier as you go. So, but no, it's not a limitation. It's just us.
And in terms of the footprint, is there a limitation on how big that can go?
Not now, again, because the all of the tracking now is inside out tracking, so it's all done from inside the headset with the cameras looking outwards. As long as it recognises the space, you can go for massive spaces. So it used to be that you used to have cameras or base stations set up and there were limitations to it. But in theory, I don't know if there is a limit. I'm sure there is, but yeah, it's a lot bigger than they used.
Anything with mixed reality?
Yes, a bit, particularly augmented reality. It's not our favourite. I think the thing with augmented reality that's interesting, it's good to develop for, but I suppose what the problem that we have with it in the context that we want to use it is that we're all about kind of public access, and AR comes with problems before you even start, because a lot of people assume it's accessible on all smartphones and everyone has a smartphone, and then you kind of find yourself having to explain that it's not available on smartphones. Google ones, it has to be on the AR court license list, but half of those don't really work very well either. So you're in with these problems all to start with, but then because it's such a wide range of devices, you are trying to get it to work. Spend a lot of time technically problem solving, which means we're doing less creative content stuff. So maybe in a research environment, if it's for specific handsets or mixed reality headsets, and then it's slightly different. But I think for something that's really publicly accessible, it's be a bit of a miss. And I've heard the same from people who have kind of commissioned quite big projects as well, who have kind of said that they had similar problems where they've, you know, commissioned it with all good intentions, and then they just keep getting complaints that people can't use it. So yeah. I think it is interesting, but it feels like it's still trying to find its space. And I guess from a really, like, honestly, from a personal point of view, because my background is what it is, I want people to be fully experienced, and I don't think.
I can understand where you come from, because I come from theatre and then moved into Unreal, so I understand like the presence of the theatre paradigm and how that plays out in what you do. And I was curious, you probably recall like Schechner talking about it rolls over because you go back to the beginning and you do the same show over and go, that repeatability.
Yeah.
And here every time you come in and it's kind of pristine, it's kind of space agnostic. It is in a sense, it's the antithesis of being site specific because, you know, you can take it anywhere. But as, you know, as theatre's evolved into performance, so those kind of assumptions have been challenged and played with. And I'm curious because I think it would have a lot of benefit beyond perhaps the arts and more in education, as to whether the things that you do could have some degree of persistence. So you do a residency, say maybe in a gallery in, I don't know, Rio de Janeiro, where there's a particular population who come in. And if you recall this morning, so I took great pleasure in building a little tower of those kind of books, which changes the environment. So the next people who come in, if you're able to capture that game state and then play it back. So it actually then starts to mirror or reflect or say something about the people who are going through that. So rather than it being agnostic, it's actually very much a reflection of those people. And you see it in other kind of performance forms where you're invited to kind of scroll, write, or otherwise mark the space. And I'm just wondering whether you know that is something that's possible to essentially capture, and whether it's something you've speculated on or would be interested in exploring.
Yes, we've talked about it. Yes, it is. I mean, I suppose in all of anything is possible. Yes, you can capture all of the stuff. You can kind of record people's movements, and you know, in the same ways you can record motion data and things like that. You definitely build it into projects. I suppose I'll answer it in a slightly different way, but one of the kind of not criticisms, the challenges that comes from the live theatre sector lies that they say the thing about theatre is it's live, it's different every time, and it's all about the live performance. And my kind of response always back to that is, you know, actually, I think the important thing is to shift sometimes the impetus for something being different every time away from the performer and back towards the audience. Because in this kind of work, like you said, you built a tower. Other times people don't build towers, or they do it in a different space. Sometimes people really like seeing how far they can throw a book off the balcony and if they can hit the window and all of those kind of things. So there is still a level that every single time people go through that show, it is different. It has that live element, but it's the agency is with the audience. It's not with the performer. So for me, part of that kind of what you're talking about is it's already built in. It's not shiny and pristine exactly the same every time. It's different every time. But actually then, like what you're talking about, I think is then the next stage on from that, how you take things out of one experience and put them into the next. And like I say, all of these things are possible, but it all comes back to that same thing of like, you need to be persistent with iterating on a project rather than going back to the drawing board, starting something new.
We did something like that in Figment XR, the augmented reality thing, had a exhibition about dinosaurs for children and just put a graffiti wall there so they could come and write some comments or whatever on the graffiti wall, and ran that over an whole afternoon. So different schools would come in and not a single child threw something rude. So that's not bad. I guess they knew, like Tim, we were watching you build that tower of books. So if you weren't here earlier, Tim, group of people did bid for electric. Tim was in there, and you were behaving a bit more inquisitively than other people. And we saw you build this tower of books in the library. And thought, wow, that's impressive.
Just on that point, and it's a technical thing. Clearly, you got the boundaries with the VR headset as demarcated with the red crosses. And I'm just curious to know this, but can you build in collision detection for things like walls, or will you always get, if you segment up the space, will you always get piercing through those individual walls? You won't get that kind of feedback.
You mean, can you do it so that when you watch it, it falls down? Yeah, you can, absolutely. Yeah. But I mean, again, it comes out to the thing of like, you then have to replicate that for every single person. And the problem, like with the wall example, you've got to be careful as well, because if you push down a wall that is actually going back into the other half of the space that you're not using, the problem is we then need to load a new level into that space. So you start to chase it. But I guess that's a bit more sort of, like the graffiti wall idea, the ability to affect your surroundings is a pretty tried and tested kind of method.
But it's also finding out the etiquette that exists in that space.
Absolutely.
What can and can't do.
And that's again, we talked earlier about like how you train your audience to know what is possible, and you have to build that into the experience as well. But yes, I guess the answer is yes, it's possible in collision for objects as well. I mean, it's the same really as
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to move on in a minute. So next people are here. Following that, so you're clearly thinking some possibilities, some new ideas there. Anybody else got an idea of something they would like to try?
Then any early scenario type things relates. So I'm coming in, so I'm still engineering, start using tool teaching students. I'm wondering whether, say, you could in theory set up a scenario, I think let's say inspecting a building or something like that. Yeah, and then they run through a series of levels by actually interacting with the environment, actually doing it. They're learning then what that involves, but without obviously physical harm to them. Like
yeah, of course. It's like fire training.
Yeah,
there's all those things that you can get people to do virtually without singling themselves. Yeah. I mean, the short answer is no, not really. We haven't done anything in that realm, but I suppose that's partly why I'm here. There's no reason why we can't. It's always the same technology, and again, it is used in those sort of areas. For us at the moment, I suppose interestingly, we've just embarked on doing a KTP, a knowledge transfer partnership as well, which is about kind of engagement with academics as well. But it largely is about broadening how we use our skill set for the market segments or sectors. So that kind of thing is really of interest at the moment to us specifically.
I've got one idea. So as part of one of the design thinking modules for postgrads, we teach about activism, the experience of being an activist, the ethics, the dilemmas, things like that.
Yeah.
It's quite hard for our students to really, one or two of them may have been out on a protest or something, but it's hard for them to, especially the international students, to know what that's like, to really empathize with being in that situation. That'd be so cool. Bit of a riot, maybe.
Yeah, right.
See what they. Yeah, that's the kind of thing I'd like to make possible.
Then you can also do training for people who have to handle riots.
Yeah. Well,
Win-win.
Our local police force would like that.
Yeah.
Batons and everything. We better let you have a rest. So you've been going some time now. So
yeah.
Thanks for Paul.
Thank you.
Once again. Okay, I'll just do some. We can have a break for a couple of minutes while we just get ready to go for our next. We've got at least WMG and WMS, so manufacturing group and medical school. In a minute, I'm going to talk a little bit, and anybody else can chip in about stuff they're doing as well. Just going to stop the recording.